Good evening. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's meeting of the Committee of Adjustment. This is a meeting to consider applications for minor variance and consents held under the authority of the Planning Act of Ontario. Please keep in mind that the intent of this process is to review the proposal that is before us, to listen to the evidence, and then make a decision. This process is not intended to be used to resolve any concerns or disputes that may exist between the town, individuals, or organizations. If a request for a deferral is made and the committee grants such a request, the committee, after consultation with the Secretary-Treasurer, will set a new hearing date. No further notice will be provided unless there are changes to the application. In order to conduct an effective and efficient hearing, we have adopted the following processes. The owner or authorized agent will be given the opportunity, if so desired, to briefly explain to us the basis of the application and answer any questions that may arise out of the hearing. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided for this presentation. You need to state your full name and address for the record. Any materials submitted to the committee for viewing will remain the property of this committee. Any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will be at the discretion of this committee. All persons attending the hearing who wish to support or oppose the application must also state your full name and address for the record. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided to make your presentation. All remarks and questions are to be directed to the chairperson of the committee. Any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will also be at the discretion of this committee. If there are several speakers sharing the same view, please select a spokesperson to present the group's opinion. We want to hear your views, however, covering the same points will not advance your case. The owner or agent will then be provided with a further 5 minutes to respond to comments made by any interested parties and answer any questions from the committee members. If the owner or agent has any concern found in staff reports, particularly with any proposed conditions, this is your opportunity to advise us. The matter will then be taken into the committee for a decision, and this will mark the end of all discussion. Once the committee makes an oral decision, any person desiring a copy must file with the Secretary-Treasurer at this meeting a written request for notice of the decision. A green sheet, which is located at the back, is provided for this purpose. Please note that you must make a written request in order to be included on the list that is used by the Ontario Municipal Board for the giving of any subsequent notice of any appeal. Written notice of the committee's decision will be mailed not later than 10 days for a minor variance and 15 days for a consent to the applicant, the owner and/or agent, and any other person who filed a written request for such notice. If you do not agree with the committee's decision, you may appeal this to the Ontario Municipal Board. The last day to appeal the decision to the Ontario Municipal Board will be noted on the decision. If no appeal is received within the prescribed time period, the decision of the committee becomes final and binding. The Secretary-Treasurer will then notify the applicant through written correspondence. People attending this committee meeting are to be courteous to and respectful of the members of the committee, town staff, and the other people in attendance tonight. Just to let you know, tonight's meeting will be live streamed and available for future viewing on the town's live stream page at oakville.ca/live. We also ask that any cellular phones and pagers be switched off during this meeting as they tend to interfere with the audio system. Thank you.
Mr. Charlebois read the preamble because he missed last meeting, so. Thank you, Mr. Charlebois. We have one regret this evening. Ms. Miguel cannot be in attendance tonight. Is there anyone here that has a declaration of any pecuniary interest on any applications before us? Okay, seeing none. Is there anyone here this evening that either wants to request a deferral or withdraw an application? Deferral or withdraw an application? Okay. We don't have any consents tonight. So we'll start with our agenda. It is quite long, and it is opening day, so let's try to get through it quickly. CAVA 60, 2017 at 1098 Fieldstone Circle, the agent owner. Good evening. Name and address for the record.
My name is Alexandra Odish. I'm the authorized agent for Carl and Irene Kopp.
Okay, just before you proceed on a presentation, let's see if we need one. Is there anyone here this evening that has an interest in application CAVA 60, 2017 at 1098 Fieldstone Circle? Okay, seeing none. Staff recommending approval. Members, have you done your site visit, read the staff report? Do you have any questions of clarification? Okay, so just so everyone generally know that our procedural bylaw allows us to dispense with full presentation where it's warranted in circumstances such as this. So unless you wish to add anything further to our application, we can take it into a committee and consider it for a decision.
No.
Okay. Who would like to move a recommendation? Thank you, Mr. Tulowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'll move this application be approved as applied for, finding that it meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act, noting there's no neighborhood objection, that the sunroom in question is generally towards the center of the lot, and there's no dwellings immediately behind this unit. I'd make that approval conditional on development proceeding in general accordance with the drawings provided, and that a building permit issue within 2 years.
Any discussion on recommendation? See none, all those support subject to the 2 conditions? Thank you, your application has been approved.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night. Okay, we'll deal with application CAV 61-2017 at 17 Mississauga Street.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. My name is Gus Ricci. I'm the architect and agent for our clients at 17 Mississauga Street. My address is 64 Rebecca Street, Oakville, Ontario.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone here this evening that has an interest in application CAV 61-2017 at 17 Mississauga Street? Okay, so proceed with the presentation, sir.
Sure if our overhead is operating yet.
Yeah, we're going to dim the lights as well because I think it doesn't show quite well.
The application before you this evening is with respect to the construction of a single-family dwelling located on the lake, on Lake Ontario, down in Laneway on Mississauga Street. By way of history, pardon me, in February of 2016, we came before the committee and asked for variances on the same property for additions, minor additions and alterations to an existing dwelling. The additions were essentially 2 bump outs, which were for front entry porches on the existing dwelling footprint, and also the construction of a new, demolition of an existing garage and the building of a new garage, essentially in a similar location. The variances that we requested back then were with respect to an increase in side yard or front yard setback. The property does not face a street, so we had to legalize the property. We received approval for a balcony in the rear yard. We received approval for the front yard. We received approval for the detached garage in the front yard. We also received approval for a maximum parapet projection from 0.3 to 0.46, and also for the detached garage to be closer to the front. Since receiving the approval of those variances, we secured approval from Conservation Halton as well. We also received the building permit and started construction. When we started construction, we discovered that some of the structure was faulty. There's a portion of the building here that was actually built on a concrete slab, which we think may have been a garage at one time. And as we got into it, we discovered that some of the foundation walls were in poor condition, as long as some of the framing on the main floor. So the main floor walls were removed, and as part of the plan, as we got into it, our client discovered that since we had to redo some of the foundation walls, he actually wanted to lower the basement level by via of actually concrete benching or underpinning, pardon me. We continued on construction, and then in February of this year, when the contractor was getting ready to do the underpinning, we discovered a lot of water infiltrating into the basement area, and we called out geotechnical engineers, TerraProbe, and they advised us that underpinning the existing structure was not recommended. There was fear that the soils would be washed out during the process. So in their recommendation, it was better to remove the existing foundation walls and replace with new foundation walls. By doing that, we required a new building permit, and in the eyes of zoning and the building department, this was deemed to be a new construction. And because it's new construction, we needed new variances. And since the original application and the variance applications before you, we are now dealing just only with the 2014 bylaws. And we're here to request the variances that were previously approved, but again, once again, we have to reapply, and that's relating to the parapet increase in height from 0.3 to 0.46, the front yard, and also to permit the balcony in the rear yard that was previously approved. You should have before you letters of support from the neighbors at 15 and 19, immediately to the west and east of our property, Mississauga Street, and also 20 Harborside Court, which is 2 to the east. Our client did go around and canvass the neighbors. He did previously, he's done it again, and the immediate neighbors don't have any objections to, the immediate to the west and east don't have any objections to the variances being proposed. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions at the moment? So this is largely a redo of the last one. You don't need the earlier variances on the older bylaw. It's just on the new, but substantially it's the same.
That's correct.
And from what I understand, because you had to alter the foundation because of hydro-G concerns,
That's correct,
it's
sir.
no longer an altered building, it's a new building, but otherwise everything is the same.
The elevations, the floor plan, the footprint have not changed at all. We've actually had to go back to Conservation Halton and reviewed this with them. And based on the fact that we have not changed the floor plan, the floor areas, they have given us approval on this current proposal as well.
And you pulled the building permit on the old approval.
That's correct. We currently have a building permit that allows us to build what was previously approved and based on underpinning the existing foundations.
Right. And now because it's a new foundation, it's new construction, not an altered building.
That's correct.
Is that a bylaw or a building code?
Sorry.
Is that a bylaw or a building code?
Which part, sir?
This, because it's a new foundation, it's no longer an altered building.
Based on our review with the building department, they deem this to be new construction, so that we're starting from scratch and that we have to come back and ask, and we will need a revised building.
And there were no transition provisions?
No.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Any follow-up questions raised on that? Yes, Mr. Charlebois.
Just want to confirm one thing with you, Mr. Chairman. The C of A variance that we agreed to then back in February, does that become null and void? Or
Well, it's for a building that they can no longer build. The building permit that was issued for that, they can't perfect it. So they need variances on the new bylaw.
so one of my questions was, for example, they went ahead and built the garage under the variance that existed before, and there's some discussion in here that garage is legal now because of that variance, and but the whole rest of the variance will disappear, because basically time will actually eradicate that variance, because they will not build it in accordance with
Well,
what we agreed
that's
to
the
do.
issue. It's not built in accordance with an altered foundation, but rather a new foundation.
My concern here, I guess, well, one of my concerns was that, and the other concern was, this garage is, not that it was fine, we agreed that you could build it, I just don't want you to be in a situation where all of a sudden the garage comes up again as a
Well,
problem.
I don't believe it does. I mean, I
Okay.
think you probably had extensive discussions and surprises with the building department.
We've had many discussions with the building
Yeah.
department and
I
planning.
imagine it's been vetted quite thoroughly to get to this point.
Can I just clarify that essentially we have a building permit to build essentially what you see on our drawings. The only difference and the only reason we're here is that to replace the foundation. Everything else stays the same. Nothing has changed on the exterior of the building, the footprint. So the only reason we're here is because we're demolishing the old foundation walls, it's triggering new construction, which means the building department wants to see a new permit application. And because we don't meet some of the zoning bylaws, they've asked us to come back and get approval on basically what was previously approved.
But your 2016 approval was under both bylaws.
That's correct.
And are you repeating those same variances? Because I can't.
Some of them, like
Some of them.
the balcony is the same. If,
That's
for
correct.
example, the garage was permitted and you were allowed to do it, and we granted approval for
Yeah.
the balcony, why are we dealing with the balcony again?
Well, with respect to the garage, the garage that's currently under construction was always a new build. It was never on an existing footprint. So we received a permit based on new footings, new foundations, new locations. So that's been granted.
All right, my concern is that if we go ahead and approve all this thing, that you don't get into this quandary. I thought I would just ask anyway. Maybe
We've
it's not
been
completely
advised
clear.
by the building department and zoning to proceed in this manner.
Okay, so just have a seat, don't go too far. We'll ask those that showed a hand that had a concern to come forward.
Hello, my name is Lucy Kasasha. I live at 3066 Seneca
So you have to
Drive.
speak a little bit slower. Lucia?
Lucy
Lucy
Kasasha.
Kasasha.
And I'm one of the property owners at 3066 Seneca Drive, one of the properties that will be most affected by this application.
Okay. Can you generally show us on that plan that's on there where you are? Across the street?
Yeah, we're directly behind, so
Okay,
it's
okay. I see it. You're on the north.
on the north side.
Yes, okay.
Correct. So we're here to advise that we
It's
have
actually quite interesting. There's two north arrows. I don't know which one's correct.
Okay. So we're here to express our concerns regarding the application. We have 6 concerns. The first concern is the variance requests are against the law. The second is due to the commercial style, big block design of the proposed building that they want approvals for their variances rather than need variances for a house that fits in with the character of the neighborhood. The third item and concern is that this application and variances, in our opinion, are not aligned with livable Oakville, Planning Guidelines Section 2.2, since the variances requested do not, in our opinion, preserve, enhance, nor protect the neighborhood character, sense of community, living environment, and quality of life. I've lived in Oakville for almost 18 years, and I enjoy the quality of life here and the living environment and the sense of livable Oakville. So I really have issues, we have issues with this application. Number 4, the variances, if approved, would allow the construction of a big box house, in our opinion, very largely out of scale on the very small water edge lot, contravening again livable Oakville Planning Guidelines Section 2.2. Number 5, in our opinion, the owners of the property have previously misled all of us by way of an application for a quote-unquote addition. However, in fact, they demolished the entire house and, in our opinion, pursued their building permit without full integrity and transparency. A new garage has recently been erected per previous variance approval, creating a status quo expectation for new variances in this application, such as a rubber stamp, just to proceed and break the law. Number 6, in our opinion, the misleading approach was continued when the property owner knocked on our neighborhood doors and our door last Sunday, asking for signatures on a pre-drafted letter of support. He claimed to us, as a neighbor, that this is just a formality and that they were not asking for anything outside the law, which is clearly not the case, and therefore we challenge any letters of support due to the misleading information and pressure applied to us to be good neighbors. Thank you.
Don't go. Any questions?
Ma'am, I'm just getting your thing here. Were you here in the last meeting in February when this building came up for variance? I read the minutes again, but I can't recall if you came to express your displeasure with the size of the house or anything at that time?
We moved in, we purchased the property at the end of June in 2016. It was not disclosed to us that this permit was underway
Okay.
or that there were any changes by any of the realtors involved.
Okay, thank you.
So your realtor didn't disclose it, but you didn't do any independent research?
We were told by the realtor, who also represented us, that there was no application underway, so we had no idea.
You should talk to your realtor. That's a surprise.
We are pursuing it, believe me.
Yeah,
We have-
because all our agendas, minutes, applications are online for everyone to see, not just realtors. Because a lot of your concerns that we heard here today, in fact, have been addressed the second time. And I'm not quite sure what's communicated out there, but from we understand, it's the change from an alteration, which was disclosed to us, to a new build, which is disclosed to us, that's triggered the need for revisions. And anyways, sorry to hear your realtor wasn't forthcoming with information, but it is online for future reference.
Thank you. I don't think that at the time we would have had any notion to check into it, because she assured us several times over the course of 2 months that there were no permits or applications underway. If she was not representing us, if she didn't have the dual role, then yes, I could see how we would have found it.
I don't want to go into that.
Sure.
But other than to say is that our information is generally available to everyone, and a phone call to the town would have, or even, anyway, the website is very, very user-friendly.
Hindsight's 2020,
The
for
town
sure.
of Oakville has spent a lot of money to make sure that citizens are well-informed from many, many, many sources, so sorry to hear that. Any questions? See none. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak to the committee? Yes, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. My name is Dr. Thamer Murad. I live on 3066, and I'm here not to speak as
Sorry, hang on.
3066 Seneca Drive.
Murad, did you say? Sorry, hang on.
Dr. Thamer Murad.
Dr. Murad.
Yeah,
So, okay, hang on. Same address.
same address.
I'm assuming there's you're
That's
the
right.
same household.
She's my wife.
Okay.
But
So
I'm
you're
not
getting
here-
two
I'm
kicks
here-
You're getting two kicks at the same can.
That's right, but I'm a person and I'm a tax-paying
yeah,
citizen
of course.
at the town of Oakville.
You're
and
going
I'm
to tell
gonna-
us something different, though, than
Yes,
what we heard.
yes, yes.
Okay.
I'm not going to repeat this.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I'm here to speak as a professional engineer. I am a professional engineer in 3 Canadian provinces, and I'm actually a member of Order of Honor of Engineers Canada. So I know what I'm talking about, and I'm a doctor in engineering. And if it wasn't for this instance, I wouldn't have known what's happening under our noses. In my opinion, this whole case is a case that tells us how, and I'm repeating again, in my opinion, how we, the citizens of Oakville, are victims of real estate agents, plus architects, plus developers who are actually changing our neighborhood into a bazaar of selling new houses by hugging the water. And those people who are on that Mississauga Strip, and I had discussions with some of them, exactly word for word, verbatim, they told me when we moved to this neighborhood, if you want to see the water, you should be able to afford to buy a waterfront house, not a second line. If these are, as a professional person, if these are the values that we are sharing in our neighborhoods, then I would reconsider working and living in a town like Oakville. Because we have a group of people who are taking those lands and try to go using the systems and the processes we have and play with it because they are the most knowledgeable people about it because they make living out of it. And then they flip those houses to other people by selling them the waterfront at triple the price or 5 times the price and so on. And to give you the proof of what I'm saying, nobody of the neighbors, although we are contesting the validity of the letters, it's only the front side of that are facing the water supported this. Because you know why? Because they are part of the same group. They want to raise the prices. And when they have a bigger house, a block house, in that place, then their properties are going to go up. So we are having a first-class citizens who are raising their prices on our back end. Now, I can also comment.
Mr. Burett, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand there's a thesis here and, displeasure with the whole process and the whole way the industry may or may not work. But we want to hear your concerns related to the variances. And
Okay,
we have
the variances. The variances is,
tests.
I read the
Hang on,
analysis.
hang on. I'm going to give you time to respond. We have 4 tests we got to consider.
Yeah.
Is it desirable? Is it appropriate? Is it minor? Does it meet the general intent and purpose of the official plan and zoning bylaw? And I think the letter that you drafted was very, very helpful in helping us understand that. The rest of the stuff, while it's very relevant for many other reasons, but it doesn't help us here tonight. So you got to.
But I have a concern.
You got to circle in on.
I have
your
a concern as an engineer who spent 40 years in engineering, and I have a lot of achievements. Okay, I may not be an architect. Where we get all of this with architectural drawings. There's no single engineering drawing here. When the analysis is presented, that's many times in the analysis, which I read in the last couple of days, that there is the new dwelling is largely the same dwelling. Now, I know English is my second language, but a dwelling is a 3-dimensional created object. It's not a 2-dimensional. These variances that you are talking about here, or we are talking about today, exist on a property that is sloped. So when you move a house meters backwards, you are actually raising the height and blocking the neighbors as well. When you are adding a 46 centimeters parapet there, that is not required, that's not needed. It's just to raise the value of the house. The structure of the building doesn't rely on it. Then that is not a need. That's a why to raise the dollar signs on this one. When we say a dwelling is the same dwelling, it's not. We need to have a 3-dimensional glasses to look at these drawings to say the real effect of what these guys are doing. They are changing the whole nature of the dwelling. It's not minor. So when somebody who is not knowledgeable, and I don't claim to be very knowledgeable, okay, you can look at my resume, this misrepresentation. There are 16 times where we say minor, minor, minor in the first presentation and in the second presentation. Well, they are not minor. They're not. But the problem is what we have with our system is nobody reads. And I can challenge, how many people have seen these drawings and they looked at it? They looked at the analysis that is misrepresented. When we say there is no large change, when my good neighbor who came to my door and say, well, we are not doing anything against the law, so why we are setting bylaws as a city, if every time somebody want to do something and say, okay, it's a minor change, let's add 16 centimeters here, and let's add 12 meters on a sloped property. This is more a technical issue that nobody is giving attention to. And things are repeating, and we are setting precedents and so on. When we ask for a balcony, when everybody knows that balconies are forbidden by a bylaw, then we are setting a precedent. Then everybody is going to have a balcony. Is this the town that we are working with? I have a lot of concerns about this. I feel insulted that these types of drawings get circulated because these are actually misrepresenting facts. And if somebody comes from another planet or from another jurisdiction and look at this, he would say, isn't there anybody in Oakville who reads things? And that's where my concern is. I feel insulted, and I want this to be on the record. Thank you very much.
Well, it definitely is on the record. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? Sorry, don't go away, Dr. Burett. Just to see, is there any questions? Okay. Thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else wishing to speak to committee on this matter? Last call for application CAV 61-2017 at 17 Mississauga Street. Okay, Mr. Ricci, back to you.
I think what we're hearing tonight is that The property owners to the north, directly to the north of this property.
Which north?
Actually, I'll clarify.
Do you want to
that for
cross out one of your north
So
arrows?
this is actual north here.
Yes, I see that. I'm just,
Project North is
yes.
directly north towards
Sure.
the neighbor's property at 3066. I think what you're hearing from the neighbors is that their beef is not with our building, but it's with their realtor.
Well, I don't think you can oversimplify it like that. But in any event, let's just have your response to that and not characterize.
Well, there was a
it.
lot of time discussing that and not a lot of time talking about zoning or planning issues, so I thought maybe I'd just reiterate that.
Yeah, we understand, but you just concentrate on the planning matters.
Sure. With respect to planning, I think what I have to refer back to is that nothing has been changed since the original application. The only thing that is changing is essentially what's happening below grade, where we're changing from an existing foundation that's going to be underpinned to one where it has been recommended by highly qualified engineers, TerraProbe, and I have a letter that says in their best recommendation that we should not underpin, we should actually replace the
Okay,
foundation
we're
walls.
not going to repeat the evidence. We heard that.
I
Is there
just
anything
wanna
new that
reiterate.
came up in that?
Right.
Well, we also understand that as part of the process, you need to get a site alteration permit with all these engineering matters are addressed quite thoroughly. It's not normal to have detailed engineering drawings at a minor variance stage.
But I'm just referring back to the comments from Dr. Murad,
Murad,
that
yes.
he was requesting engineering information on, we have reports that have recommended that we actually replace the
Right.
foundation walls.
And you're following your professional's recommendation.
That's correct.
As you should.
With respect to the size of this building, you'll see in this plan, you see parts of the neighboring properties to the west and east. And I'd like to highlight that this portion here is actually the garage of the neighbors to the west.
Okay.
And that is part of the detached dwelling. If we go to this drawing, now this drawing represents the neighbors, the full width of the neighbor's property to the west. This is their home. That's the garage. This is the property to the east. This is a survey of the original dwelling that existed on the property. For comparison purposes, you can see the scale of the existing house on that property versus the neighboring properties is substantially smaller. So as far as scale and development, we don't think this is a big intrusion on the neighborhood. The neighbors are concerned about scale, massing, size. They call it a big box. This is the elevations. Again, these elevations have not changed. Dr. Murad referred to the fact that the elevation makes it look taller. The reality is the building, because we're sloping down towards the water, our grade is actually lower than his property. So he has an advantage of being higher than we are and has the ability to look over versus looking up at the property. This red line here represents the point at the front property line, established grade, from which we have to measure our height. The maximum height permitted on this property is 9 meters. 9 meters measured from that point puts us up here. The proposed height of our building is 6.6 meters. Well below what's permitted on that property. With respect to the actual massing of the property, these black lines represent in elevation where the property lines are. The green lines are the required setbacks. 2.4 meters on either side. We're at 2.7 on the west and over 5 meters to the east, well within what's permitted. With respect to the parapets, I've shown here the parapet heights. They're varying heights, and part of that is architectural reasons. We wanted to, instead of having one long continuous line, we thought it would be better to break down the mass to actually have two different heights. And part of the reason is to actually hide part of the sloping flat roof that's behind the parapet. So the blue lines represent the sloping flat roof. And actually this portion of the parapet meets the bylaw, but unfortunately when we get to the opposite end, when it's sloping down, we don't meet the actual bylaw itself.
Okay. You
With
have 6
respect to the
seconds.
balcony, sir, it was approved before, and I may add that the actual neighbors to the north have a balcony in their rear yard as well. So it's pretty consistent to what exists in the neighborhood.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Ricci? Okay, thank you. We'll take this matter to committee. Who would like to move a recommendation?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Having reviewed the material here and done my site visit and taken into account the staff recommendations, which are to recommend for variance 1 and 2 and not to recommend for variance 3 with respect to the balcony, and also taking into account the 2 people that we heard from the public. The chairman had mentioned before that when looking at this thing, that we have to take into account the 4 tests under the Planning Act. And specifically, we're here to discuss only the 3 variances which were put in front of us, which is to permit a parapet, to permit the maximum front yard of the dwelling to be 12.0 meters, and to permit a balcony. I do note that the applicant did point out the fact that with respect to the building envelope, he's well within the building envelope, so it's not part of our purview to be able to comment on the nature of the building. We can only talk to the variances that are here. When I look at the first variance with respect to the parapet, taking into account what we did hear about the clear height, a small little variance on a parapet towards the end of it does meet all 4 tests under the Planning Act. Looking at respect to the front yard, although we didn't really talk about it here, we did talk about it the last time and again, there was a lot of discussion about that, and I do feel that, again, it meets the 4 tests under the Planning Act. And I did go back to my notes with respect to this, with respect to the balcony, and yes, it's quite true that the balconies are prohibited within certain zonings, but the applicant has a right to be able to come forward and say that, you know, my house is a little bit different where it's situated and how it is. And I do note that there are balconies in that area. There are also balconies on other houses, particularly 20 Harborside, I wrote it down, that face the water. And I don't believe that this particular balcony will cause any overlook problems, which is really the case with respect to balconies. So again, I find that this particular thing does meet all 4 tests under the Planning Act. Therefore, Mr. Chairman, I do make a recommendation that this committee approve all 3 variances as stated, subject to the condition, just bear with me, subject to the condition in here that the revised plans be submitted to the Planning Services Department. No, that does not go, sorry. That one is gone, I apologize. Subject that the proposed dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the revised plans, and subject further that this will expire within 2 years if a building permit is not issued.
Okay, so the recommendation is to approve, subject to those 2 conditions. Any discussion on the recommendation? Mr. Tilowski?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'm going to support that motion, but I just think it bears adding that we heard from 2 residents in opposition, and while it's very evident that they're not in favor of the house, be it the size of the design, but in both the written and the oral submissions, none of the issues that were raised really speak to the 3 variances, and as a result of that, I was not swayed by the concerns by those residents.
Any further discussion? See none? Okay, so the recommendation is to approve, subject to the 2 conditions. We heard all those in support. No one opposed. That's carried unanimous. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
No, you didn't. I got it all for you. Okay. Let's proceed with application CAV 62-2017 at 486 Trillium Drive.
Good evening,
evening,
Mr.
sir.
Chairman, members of the committee. David Nelson, planning consultant, 382 Bartos Drive, Oakville, Ontario.
Okay, thank you, sir. Let's just see if there's anyone here this evening that has an interest in application CAV 62-2017 at 486 Trillium Drive. Okay, we have a situation here that's proposed that the staff are recommending approval. Members, do you have any areas of concern, any items that you want clarified? I see everyone shaking their head in the negative. Mr. Nelson, is there anything you wish to add to the application?
No, Mr. Chairman, other than I note staff has indicated in their report that there's a substantial amount of development in that area. I did drive out and note that indeed there is a lot of new development in that particular neighborhood.
Okay. We'll take this matter to committee. Thank you for your comments. Who would like to move a recommendation? Mr. Hardcastle?
Mr. Chairman, having reviewed the submitted materials and having undertaken a site visit, I am satisfied that the requested variance conforms to the four tests of the Act. And as such, I will put forward a motion of approval subject to two conditions. The first being that the proposed dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the plans dated February 2016 to 2017, and that the approval will expire within 2 years from the date of the decision if a permit has not been issued.
Okay. Discussion on a recommendation? Seeing none. The recommendation is to approve subject to those two conditions. All those in support? No one opposed. That's been approved unanimous.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we'll proceed on application CAV 63-2017 at 2275 Falling Green Drive. Okay, just hang on. Those green sheets, sir? Yeah. You can leave them up there on the front table, and we will pick them up before the day is over. Thank you. That's perfect. Thank you. Good evening, sir. Name and address for the record.
Doug Taylor, Frontiers Landscape Architect and Agent for the owners. Address 10310, 6th line, Georgetown.
Okay, thank you.
Georgetown or Guelph?
Sorry, yes, we have a P.O. box in Guelph as well. Yeah.
So you're Guelph or Georgetown?
Guelph, the Guelph
Guelph.
address that you
All
have.
right. All right, perfect. Is there anyone here this evening that has an interest in application CAV 63-2017 at 2275 Falling Green Drive? Okay, sir, just a little explanation because there seems to have been some changes to the applications that have been reviewed by staff. I guess there's been an improvement in the variance. Maybe you can let us know what that is.
Yep, that's correct. So we were originally asking for relief from the 1.5 meter rear yard setback for a proposed in-ground pool. Staff thought that that was excessive, and we discussed that they would approve a 1 meter setback from the rear lot line, which we agreed to and revised our plans accordingly.
It's from a 0.5 to a 1.
That's
You're
correct.
still shy by 0.5 meters, and you've had discussions with staff, and staff, you've met sort of staff halfway, I guess?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay, and on that basis, you're wishing to revise your application so the variance request is 1 meters rather than 0.5.
That's correct. And they have those revised plans.
And you have those revised plans?
I do, and they also do, yes.
Well, can you show us?
Yes, sure.
Because we haven't seen them. Members, are you amenable to accepting that revised application? Okay. Everyone supports the revised application, I guess, to accept the revised application. We have these plans? Okay. So where do they measure the setback, from the water line?
No, the rear lot line.
Yeah, I know, but is it to?
Oh, the pool, yes, yes, the pool apron, yeah.
To the
which
pool.
is the water line.
To the
That's
water
correct.
line, right?
Yes,
Okay, so rather than 0.5 to the water line, you're 1 meter.
that's correct.
Okay, any
And
questions?
the bylaw is 1.5.
Right.
Yeah.
Any questions on the revised application, members? Is there anything you wish to further add on the application?
Nope.
Okay, thank you. Normally what happens is we get these at the meeting, and no one has seen it, but you've actually preempted that expectation, and you discussed it with staff, and you've had satisfaction with staff, and you present these revised, which is a different way of doing it, just as effective, probably a little bit more. So anyways, we'll proceed now on the recommendation. Thank you.
Great.
Who would like to move a recommendation? Mr. Hardcastle? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, having reviewed the materials and including the revised drawings, undertaking my visit, I'm satisfied that the requested variance conforms, the variance as revised conforms to the tests of the Act, and I'll put forward a motion of approval, subject to standard condition that the proposed pool be constructed in general accordance with the revised plans dated March 30th, 2017, as submitted. There is not a standard building permit requirement for a pool, and as such, I won't put forward our standard second condition.
Okay. Discussion on that recommendation? See none. All those in support? No one opposed. That application has been approved. Your application
Great. Thank you very much.
sir. Thank you. Okay, so we'll proceed on application CAV 64-2017 at 269 Gloucester Avenue. Gloucester.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Terry Patterson. I live at 269 Gloucester Avenue. I believe the matter before you is something that the committee or the individuals have already, for the town, seem to approve.
Hang on. You're rushing way ahead. So well, hang on. So, Mr. Patterson, you reside at 269 Gloucester?
That's correct.
So you're not the owner, but
My wife is the owner.
your wife's the owner, and you're here on her behalf.
That's correct.
So we can use the same address?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I hear you that staff have reviewed this and they have no concern. Can I ask? I'll ask because there's a reason why I'm going to go
Sure.
behind this variance. Why do you need this variance?
I'm just.
Can we get the lights, please?
I'm just making the property legal conforming in case we want to sell the property at some point in the future.
But you're not doing any additions, no alterations, no improvements?
Nothing.
And
Property was
what-
built 9 years ago, and the root of the problem is that we originally built the property to the bylaws.
Right.
And subsequently, the neighbor to the south came up with a different set of blueprints or prints on the property of the survey. And rather than fight it, when I believed that we were correct, I just agreed to build our side wall into the property and rather than contest it, considering we were in the middle of construction at that time. And it was only after completion that we were advised by the town, because of the concession that we made to them, that we were legally non-conforming. And at that time, it wasn't worth taking up the matter, but now I'd like to get the property properly zoned.
Okay, I'm not following this. We're talking about the interior side yard.
That's correct.
So you build the interior side yard at the required. Now, we're talking about at the time that you built it 9 years ago.
That's correct.
Your existing interior side yard of 3.36 meters complied with the zoning at the time you built it.
No, when we built the survey that we had on the property, all right, we believed at that time was the legal survey.
Can you show us?
According to our survey company at that time, we believe that's exactly to be correct. We built the property based on the survey that we have, and it was only during the course of construction when we were actually attempting to build the sidewall that the neighbor raised an issue saying that they have a different survey, all right, and they were disputing predominantly at the back corner of the property that there was approximately 3-foot difference. And rather than dispute the thing, we came to an agreement where we would build our wall starting at what they perceived to be the property line to be back into theirs, and then I got a formal agreement in registration of the plan that, that we have a, I guess you'd call it an agreement to, you know, to service the wall or anything into their property on that side. This was really done as a concession at that stage, and it was only after completion of everything that I was advised by the town, because we made the concession, that we were actually non-conforming by whatever the difference is there, a foot or 3 feet, whatever the difference is in the variance.
So the setback, what was the setback required under the old bylaw?
4.42. And we built.
Well, no, 4.2.
4.2, sorry.
So the old bylaw and the new bylaw, the setback is the same,
Exactly.
no change.
No change.
And the building you thought was built at 4.2.
It was built at 4.2 until such time that I made the agreement with them to accept their survey rather than the survey that I had.
And you got a building permit issued on your survey work.
Yes,
So you relinquishing the, basically the, almost a meter?
yep.
And is that done by way of severance? How are you giving up that right?
There was an agreement.
Lawyers involved?
Oh, yeah. Court, lawyer. It's now registered under the land registry office.
So, okay, so let me just fact track. So so you have an agreement that's been court approved somehow that says whatever rights you thought you had on that, well, let's call it a meter or 0.9 meters, is no longer yours. And as a result of that concession, your setback that you thought conformed and everyone thought conformed no longer conformed.
That's correct.
And so based on that order that it happened after you constructed,
That's correct.
now you're trying to recognize that deficient setback.
That's correct.
Gotcha. That helps. And the reason I asked all this, because I'm of the view we can't grant variances we don't need. You know, but in this instance, it's the change in the dimensions of the lot that's triggered that.
That's
Whereas
correct.
you had a permit in the building that conformed, it no longer conformed because of that court order or that adjustment made through the land registry office.
That's correct.
That's helpful, thank you. Any questions? Okay. Again, is there anyone here this evening that has an interest in application CAV 64-2017 at 269 Gloucester Avenue? See none. Okay, we'll take this matter to committee. Who would like
Thank you.
to move a recommendation? Mr. Talowski?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'll move that this application be approved as applied for, finding that it meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act. I'll note that there's no neighborhood opposition and that this is indeed a unique case. I think it's easiest to summarize it as the property line moved after the house was built. But given the nature of it, it doesn't appear that it was a legal non-conforming issue and that the variance should have been required at the time. So I feel that the committee is fully within its jurisdiction to deal with it. So again, I'd move the application be approved with no conditions.
Thank you for that summary, Mr. Talowski. It's quite helpful. Any discussion on recommendation? See none, all those in support? No one opposed, the application has been approved. Okay, now we'll proceed with application CAVA 65-2017 at 227 Wycroft Road.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. My name is John Sinopoli of R.H. Carter Architects, 5040 Dundas Street West in Toronto.
Okay, thank you, sir. Let's just see, is anyone here this evening that has an interest in application CAV 65-2017 at 227 Wycroft Road? Okay, sir, because staff are recommending refusal, we'd like a quick presentation by you.
Certainly.
You have 5 minutes and 1 second. Oh,
Thank you.
okay, now you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Roxham Holdings, our client, is
By the way, you don't have to take up the whole 5 minutes, okay?
Understood.
Okay.
Roxham Holdings, our client, is a company which owns numerous properties in the town of Oakville, all of which are family-owned and operated facilities. Our client has been doing business in the town of Oakville for over 40 years now. Part of their commitment to their clients is to provide them with the best service they can while staying competitive in the marketplace. In order to stay competitive, our client is continuously upgrading their facilities and renovating to state-of-the-art establishments while continuing to service and meet their clients' needs and expectations. Our client is active in Oakville's community and gives back to this community by holding charity events for various groups and organizations. The project before us here this evening is one such project. The site of this development is located at 227 Whitecroft Road at the northeast corner of Whitecroft Road and Sinclair, bound by the QEW to the north, Whitecroft Road to the south, and Sinclair Road to the west. A portion of the original building has been demolished and construction is currently underway to renovate the former industrial building to a state-of-the-art automotive retail establishment. It is proposed that a small roof terrace be added towards the southern end of the building, situated on the high roof of the facility. It has a relatively small footprint in comparison to the building overall. It will be enclosed with a glass guard and screened from view with planters at the perimeter of the terrace. It will not be directly accessible to the public and will be used as the venue to host our clients' charity events and enjoy the open air when weather permits. The current zoning bylaw permits roof terraces only within the residential high, mixed-use, neighborhood commercial, core commercial, or office employment zones. An application similar to ours was submitted to the C of A for approval of a minor variance to permit a rooftop terrace for a project located in an E3 zone. This project was located at 2988 Bristol Circle. Application number CAVA. Oh, very good. This application was heard on September 13, and at that time, staff were waiting on an OMB decision, which was to provide regulations for rooftop terraces. Staff's opinion at that time was that since the bylaw did not provide the regulations for roof terraces, that granting a minor variance at that time was premature and asked that the application be deferred. The application was deferred and heard again on November 8th. Planning staff's opinion at that time was that the application did not maintain the general intent and purpose.
Mr. Sinopoli, we're fully aware of that application. It's very, very familiar to us, very recent. Just stick to your
Certainly.
application and the 4 tests.
Okay, the end result of that was that the Committee of Adjustment approved the application. I believe subsequently planning staff had filed an appeal to that decision, and it was scheduled to be presented before the OMB. Before being presented to the OMB, I believe planning staff retracted their appeal, and in the end, it was approved.
Again, Mr. Sinopoli, we don't plan by precedent, but we're fully aware by that.
Understood.
So you just move ahead on that.
Well, in the advent of today's attempts to promote amenity spaces and green spaces and looking at the use for the proposed terrace, we believe that this application is a step in the right direction. Although the site does not fall specifically within the zone that permits rooftop terraces, we believe the variance is minor in nature and maintains the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. And I'd like to further add that both ward councillors fully support this application.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. Again, is anyone here this evening that has an interest in the application, CAV 65-2017 at 227 Wycroft Road? See none. Okay, thank you, sir. We'll take this matter to committee. Who would like to move a recommendation? Mr. Talowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to agree with both of you. We don't make decisions by precedent, and this is very similar to Bristol Circle. And I believe
only you can split the atom.
And I believe I made that motion on that one. And Mr. Chair, I believe the rationale is very similar. I'm going to move this application be approved as applied for, finding that it meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act, and specifically, staff in their report reference that they're reviewing the zoning to see if this is in fact an appropriate way to deal with it. But as I see it, Mr. Chair, rooftop terraces are permitted in zones that permit commercial uses. This is a commercial use that's in a zone that doesn't permit the rooftop terrace, so I believe the intent of the bylaw is to permit rooftop terraces for commercial use of this nature, and as such I believe this is a minor variance and would move its approval subject to development proceeding in accordance with the drawings provided, and that a building permit issue within 2 years.
Thank you for that. Discussion on recommendation. See none. All those in support? No one opposed. Sorry, application.
Thank you.
Approved.
Have a good evening.
Thank you. Application CAV 66-2017 at 1268 Donnelly Crescent.
Evening, Mr. Chairman, different hat this time. David Nelson, Senior Planner, Ruth Victor and Associates, 481 North Service Road West, Unit A33.
Okay, thank you, sir. Is there anyone here that has an interest in application CAV 66-2017 at 1268 Donnelly Crescent? Okay, again, we're in that situation where I'm going to poll to see if any of the committee members have any need for additional information, any questions? You've done your site visit, you've reviewed the application. Anything you wish to add, sir?
No, Mr. Chairman, other than I did tour the neighborhood and noticed there are a number of new builds in the community, and I think this is a point that was raised in the staff report.
Okay, well, we'll take this back to committee. Who would like to move a recommendation? Mr. Charlebois, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, having conducted my site visit and taken into account the staff report where staff is recommending acceptance of the variances and noting that there's no input from the public, I'd like to put forward a motion to approve these 3 variances as presented, subject to the condition that the approval will expire 2 years from the date of this decision, that the proposed development does not proceed or a building permit is not issued, and further that the proposed dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the plans dated March 3rd, 2017 as submitted.
Okay, discussion on recommendation? Seeing none, all those in support? No one opposed, your application has been approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Okay, application CAV 67-2017 at 309 Church Street. Summer must be approaching. Everyone's looking for rooftop terraces. Sir, you're here on a rooftop terrace. Name and address for the record?
Yes, my name is Fernando Lima, Lima Architects, 5100 South Service Road, Burlington.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone here this evening that has an interest in application CAV 67-2017 at 309 Church Street? Okay, I don't see any. Sir, again, sounds awfully familiar to what we heard earlier.
Exactly.
So rather than say ditto for your presentation, why don't you give us a brief overview of your situation, and then you have 5 minutes or less to do that.
Okay, so we are proposing to have a rooftop on the corner of Church in Reynolds, and then that overviews the corner, no anybody else. So again, similar to the other application, we're just looking for relief from the CBD zone requirement to have a rooftop terrace, and yes, so that's pretty much the very simple application.
And you adopt the earlier submissions, I guess. Okay. Members, question?
Probably a question for planning, just for my edification. I mean, I guess this would be called a balcony if it was overhanging the roof, but since it's on the roof, it's called a rooftop terrace, even though it's parallel. It's not really on the roof of the 4th floor. It's kind of on the roof of the 3rd floor. Is that?
Yeah, yes, that's correct.
The legal interpretation of it?
That's correct, sir.
Okay. Okay, that's it.
Any further questions? Okay, sir, thank you. We'll take this matter to committee. Just call again. Is anyone that has an interest in application CAV 67-2017 at 309 Church Street? Okay. Who would like to move a recommendation? Mr. Hardcastle, thank you.
Consistent with the position taken previously, I think that this rooftop terrace is contemplated and consistent with the intent of our of the zoning bylaw, and I'll put forward a motion of approval subject to 2 conditions: that the addition be constructed in general accordance with the plans as submitted, and that the permit will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a permit has not been issued. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So you recommend approval, subject to the two conditions you said? So that's in accordance with the plans and 2-year. Okay, discussion on recommendation? Seeing none, all those in support? No one opposed, that application has been approved. Okay, application, okay, we're now in the deferred application, CAV 201 of 2016 at 355 Sawyer Road. This matter was deferred from our December 13, 2016 agenda. Good evening, sir. Name and address for the record.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, committee members. My name is David Brown. I'm the planning associate at David Small Designs. We're the authorized agents for the owners of the property at 355 Sawyer Avenue. And
Okay, again, who is here this evening that has an interest in application CAVA 201 2016? This is the revised application for 355 Sawyer Road. Okay, there is none, but you do have staff that are recommending refusal, so if you can proceed with a brief presentation.
yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. The application this evening is modified from the original or the previous application. I did meet with planning staff and had some discussions. The square footage of the home was reduced such that the house now complies with the maximum square footage permitted under the zoning bylaw.
So you eliminated a variance?
We did. In fact, we eliminated 2 variances, Mr. Chairman.
Can you tell us what those are?
The first one was the floor space, and that's been reduced such that we comply. The second was with respect to a front yard setback, specifically to an eave overhang, which is this eave structure here. And essentially, we've shifted the house back, if you will. We've just pushed the front wall of the house back such that the encroachment into that required setback now complies with the bylaw.
So you had 4 variances and you reduced 2?
That's correct.
And the 2 that you kept are the same in terms of previous requests?
No, they're not, Mr. Chairman. With the the garage, the attached garage, there's a maximum area permitted for an attached garage of 45 square meters. We've reduced that down to 47. We were somewhere in the range of 54 was my recollection, Mr. Chairman. And the remaining variances with respect to lot coverage. And the original application had a lot coverage of just over 31%. It was after the revisions to the floor area, we were just going through and recalculating the lot coverage. I determined or discovered that the manner in which we had calculated was not correct. We had not included the extent of the eave projections. This house has a modern architecture, as you can see from the front elevation, architectural elevation, and that includes larger overhangs that project out in the range of 3 feet. And the way the bylaw is framed in the town, as I understand it in my discussions with zoning staff, is that when we project beyond that point
So their coverage.
5, it includes in coverage. So it's not just the distance that we were allowed, it's the entirety of that
So
overhang.
you eliminated 2 variances, so you reduced one from 47 to 54, and then you went slightly up on the coverage because of these parapet projections.
Exactly, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman. A couple of comments just by way of just by way of information to sort of set the premise for my application. The red line on this site plan outlines the limit or extent of the second floor. And I outlined that for the committee's reference because it's very difficult to see in a 2-dimensional elevation plan such as that where the extent of the second floor is. And that's why I've provided this outline here, because I would note that this wall, the plane of this wall is back from the plane of the front wall. The plane of this wall is back even farther from the plane of this front wall. This 2-story element is an architectural feature at the front, and that's located right here and has a width of that relative to the front, entire front wall of the dwelling. One other element that in my discussions with planning staff that came to light was the relationship of the proposed dwelling to the street. And after my discussions, this was the original concept that we had prepared for the home. It's a rendering just to give some context of what we'd be looking at. And you can see the different plane here. You don't even see the second floor on this side, but there is no front door on the property. And therefore, the concern was expressed to me by the planning staff that there was no relationship to the street. We have revised that front elevation to put the front door facing the street. There's steps down. There'll be a walkway that will go over to the driveway here at the side of, here at the front, just to tie that back into the driveway and give the house a relationship to the street. I raise that issue because in reviewing this staff report, you will note that Planning Department are recommending refusal. It's the position of staff that the proposal does not maintain the general intent and purpose of the official plan. And specifically, they identified 3 elements, being the built form of the development, and they talk about scale, height, massing, architectural character, and materials to be compatible with the surrounding area. Compatible is a term that is often misinterpreted, I might offer to the committee. Fortunately, in the town's official plan, living urban design guidelines, they do specifically define what compatible means, and it's development or redevelopment of uses which may not necessarily be the same as or similar to the existing development, but can coexist with the surrounding area without an acceptable adverse impact. And that's often what, in my experience, the committee has the challenge is to determine what that impact is of a proposal. I recognize that time is fleeting, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I'll try to get to the points. The proposed development in terms of height, we are below at 8.45 is the maximum height of this proposed structure to this point. The bylaw allows us considerably higher, but that's just an architectural feature there. 2 feet lower is the main roof structure of this home, and that is putting us under 8 meters in height. The massing with the stepping back of the second floor element from that ground floor wall is significantly reducing the impact. The impact, the other adverse impact context or consideration is how does this house relate to the surrounding homes in the neighborhood? The Google mapping is quite fantastic because in the old days we used to have to provide you with a whole bunch of Polaroid photos, and now we can go online and print out some pretty neat things that gives sort of a 3D perspective. This is Sawyer Road. This is the property we're replacing. Next door to the north, more or less, is the a new home that's been built, and I'm showing that just in terms of relationship. We've got a house there that has some typical architecture that we're seeing in new homes and renewal. The home on the south side is a bungalow, very typical to this neighborhood, and it sits back here and behind the trees. We're putting a new house in between those 2 homes, this low-profile bungalow, this new large 2-story home with a higher roof line and a 2-story massing. And I'm going to suggest to the committee, it's my opinion, that in looking at this house with this front elevation and the width of this elevation, the 2-story element here, that this structure being lower, only at the bulk of the structure being less than 8 meters in height, we will be lower than this house stepping down towards this house. The separation that we're providing on that southerly side helps provide a separation between these 2 houses to achieve that spacing and reduce that impact of the massing.
Okay,
It strikes me that
you're wrapping up?
I will wrap up now, Mr. Chairman. It strikes me that the issue is more about architectural design than it is about compatibility. It's my submission, Mr. Chairman, that this house, while it is different, it is compatible. It does address some of the massing issues with its height, and in the context of this neighborhood, while it will be different, it will be something that I think we will see more of as this neighborhood faces a lot of renewal. It's a very common architectural style right now, and to that end, Mr. Chairman, the variances are minor in my opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Questions of Mr. Brown? Mr. Tilowski?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Brown, I do accept that compatible does not mean the same as. My concern is the orientation combined with the variance for coverage, which the orientation you've chosen creates a situation where there is a significant intrusion beyond what would be the established rear of the homes, and by increasing the coverage on top of that may be exasperating that problem. And I'm, like staff, I'm having some difficulty coming to a conclusion that this application, when you combine the increase in coverage and the orientation, whether it's desirable or not.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, just in response to that, the Livable Oakville design guidelines do specifically speak to rear yard privacy, and they speak to this specific element. And they do note that new development, which projects beyond the established setback of adjacent dwellings, should be designed such that height and massing of the projection do not cast a shadow onto amenity space in the rear yards of the adjacent properties. Two things I read out of that. One is that the official plan contemplates that we won't have an exactly consistent rear line or rear elevation of dwellings. This deck structure is, the access out to the deck is here, the access to the rear yard is there. There is a fireplace feature here which will provide a visual buffer to some degree. It's not the full height, it doesn't enclose the structure, so we're not creating a solid wall there. And I'll just show this photo if I may. The bulk of the amenity space for the property to the northerly side, which I would suggest to the committee would be the most impacted in terms of the privacy as it relates to the covered deck, and perhaps this photo better shows it. Our home would be situated in an area that the footprint would extend into that. Their amenity space is on the opposite side of the dwelling. There is rear grass here, I concede, but there is a closed sunroom, and it does appear that there's a patio area through here. There's a balcony up here on this level. So the bulk of their amenity space is away from our property, and to that end, it's my submission that the introduction of this rear covered porch at grade will not create an adverse impact on their rear yard amenity, although yes, it does project beyond the rear wall of their dwelling.
Other questions? Mr. Charlebois?
Just a quick question on your, with respect to the orientation. I see from the drawings, I didn't notice it at first, but now that you pointed it out, that you have created a door. But in reality, the main entranceway is still off on the side, correct? I mean, this is really, all you've done is put a second door in that someone could access from that way, but that's not the orientation of the house. So the key thing here is that the house is oriented not towards the street, but towards the neighbor, and that would include cars going into the garage, people coming in and out, whether it's the occupants or visitors or whatever. Okay, that's probably not a question, but so the question then becomes, obviously you've had a lot of discussions with the town of Oakville, and you couldn't arrive at a compromise with them with respect to this orientation?
The short answer is no. The orientation of the dwelling and the architectural style were the issues in my mind in terms of that relationship to the street, that staff were of the position that it was not consistent with the official plan. And while I'm not suggesting it is in full compliant, I think that the intent and purpose of the plan and some of the issues that I've touched on can be addressed through this development. I would note, and as I did with staff, we're not asking for rear yard setback relief, we're not asking for front yard relief or side yard relief. We're building inside an envelope. We do have a coverage issue, which is related to the overhangs associated with the roof. The structure itself is 25.5% lot coverage. That black outline is 25.5%. Notwithstanding that, the orientation and configuration of the dwelling was something that staff were not prepared to support, and I was unable to convince them of otherwise.
So you're asking for 31.55, of which 25.5 relates to the building, and the balance, roughly about 6%, or the rest of the math relates to the overhangs?
2.7 is the covered porch. 2.7%, pardon me, is the covered porch. The balance is the overhangs. So we're looking at what about the building footprint itself, less the overhangs and the balcony? This black outline here,
Yes.
that is 25.5%.
So the building is 25.5, and then you add to that the overhangs and the parapets that we saw?
Correct.
And
that
those
puts me-
architectural features, those other matters to give it building some uniqueness, brings it up to 31.55.
That's correct. Areas through here, through there,
Right.
that extend out and over.
Okay,
and have
gotcha.
extended.
Sorry to interrupt, but go ahead. Any further questions? Okay. Again, is there anyone here this evening that has an interest in application CAVA 201-2016? This is a revised application that was deferred from our meeting of December 13, 2016 at 355 Sawyer Road. Okay, seeing none. We'll take this matter to committee. You'll leave those with us, sir?
I'll leave it all with you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Who would like to move a recommendation? Go ahead, Mark. Well, obviously, you're giving us something to think about.
Wasn't entirely my intent, Mr. Chairman.
Why don't we get a recommendation on the floor to start the discussion and see where it goes? Give it a twirl there, Mr. Charlebois.
Mr. Chairman, having toured the site and read the staff report, which I note that on both variances, the town of Oakville recommends denial. Having listened to the presentation here, as well as noting that there are no submissions from the public or the neighbors, as I looked at these two variances, the first one with respect to the private garage, I'm prepared to say that it does meet the four tests under the Planning Act, and the increase in the square footage is relatively minor. And, you know, no surprise, what we're dealing with here is the second variance, and the variance itself is exasperated by the orientation of the building, that instead of going across the street frontage, projects into the rear area. This is not necessarily an easy decision, because this is a very nice building. It's very unique in how it looks, but I'm going to recommend denial of the second variance, purely from the basis that the orientation of this building, whether I have my opinion on whether that's appropriate or not for the development, and I don't think it is, I also don't think granting the increase of lot coverage such that this building continues to project its entire living area, as well as its entrance for the residents and the visitors and the cars into the backyards of at least one of the neighbors. So I'm going to recommend denial on the second variance, and I guess on that basis, I'll probably recommend denial on both variances.
So you're recommending refusal of the application? Yes. Okay, that's fair enough. Discussion on the recommendation? See none? Oh, Mr. Telesky?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with my colleague. This one's difficult, recognizing that the orientation you choose is your right under the zoning bylaw, and I don't believe that is inconsistent with the official plan, but I can't bring myself to conclude that the orientation combined with variance, which is increasing the coverage and exasperating the orientation and the intrusion into the established rear yards, I just can't bring myself to accept that that is desirable in this situation, so I will support my colleague's motion.
Any further discussions? Mr. Hardcastle, thanks.
Just very quickly, I'm going to echo my colleagues' opinions, noting the potential for impact on the adjacent property, particularly the one immediately adjacent to the garage. I have some significant concerns with respect to that, and so I'll be supporting my colleague's motion.
Okay, so We'll put this to a vote. The recommendation is to refuse the application. All those in support? And I abstain.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Your application being for you, sir. Okay, we'll deal with application CAV 205-2016. This is a revised application for 2913 Sherwood Heights Drive. This is, was deferred from February 28, 2017. Good evening, sir. Name and address for the record.
It's Paul Wright from ACI Wright Architect. I'm the agent for the owner.
Okay, so if I recall, last time you were here, I think it's summarized in the report, you had a 6-story height, 92 units, and you required a height variance for the parapet,
Correct.
not for the units itself, but for the parapet architectural feature. Staff were supportive, and you had a variance that was triggered. What happened since then?
Well, I think the owners felt that there seemed to be some reasonable opposition, even though the owners and the planning feel that there's an as-of right to build 6 stories.
Right? Well, not really, because you needed a parking variance, so.
Well, there's other ways to take care of the parking variance, but
Right.
So that could be done. But the height was basically recommendation from planning, because we had an owner who was willing to put some embellishments on the building.
I remember the parapet.
Yeah, the parapet. So, so that they felt that the way to reduce that, they've eliminated the embellishments and reduced the height so that they could reduce the parking impact. So hope that that would appease the neighbors and allow that to go through. And I know that the committee members, or a couple of committee members, wanted to review the traffic justification report. So it was an attempt by the owners to address concerns of neighbors and hope that that would then help move this through.
Okay.
And we have been in touch with the COCA as well through the process.
Okay, reason why I asked for a presentation, because I recognize some faces, I think. Any questions of Mr. Wright at the moment? Okay. Anything you wish further to add, sir? Well, we'll invite you back as soon as you hear those. So who is here that has an interest in application CAVA 205-2016 for 2913 Sherwood Heights Drive? All right, who would like to speak to the committee? Are we all here in support now or in opposition still? All right, you got to come down. Whoever wants to come down, there is a show of 4 hands. Okay, no one wants to take the floor? We'll need your name and address for the record, sir.
Hi, Nick Gachalian, 65 Spears Road.
How do you spell the last name?
Spears Road?
No, your last name.
Oh, Gachalian, Gachalian.
On Spears Road?
Yep.
You live in the area?
My family lives on Prince John Circle.
And what, and where?
1496 Prince John Circle.
1496,
1496 Prince John Circle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Prince.
It's the road parallel.
Prince John Circle.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Right.
So you're here to communicate the concerns of your parents?
Yeah, my family who currently and still
Yes.
lives there.
Okay, let's hear.
I just
Were you here the last time?
I was, yes.
Yeah, I remember you.
Yep.
Okay.
So I just wanted to convey that the architect has illustrated in his drawings that there's a study done in terms of sightlines. And I know that the members here of the committee are interested in visiting the site and looking at the site and seeing those sightlines. But we've also done our own study from the second-story view from our homes along the street parallel facing the proposed hotel, and wanted to share that with you in future conversations as this proceeds. So I just wanted to.
You're not going to have another chance to speak to us. This is your only chance.
Okay. Well, the thing is that if, in terms of screening, in terms of proving to you that the sight lines are still quite visible, I've prepared some sketches. I don't have them in hard copy form, but wanted just to show you that the trees that are basically run parallel to the sound wall that was recently installed over the past years. Oh, thanks.
But sir, here's our dilemma.
Yes.
The building has been reduced in height, and we heard that the six-story building is permitted by zoning. So your family bought into an area where the heights were well-known.
Yeah, 25, 30 years ago.
Well, still, I mean, they had a chance to object to those heights. So what's happened here is the height variance that was originally requested was for the parapet. So they eliminated the parapet, and they also eliminated one whole floor.
I understand the variances, you know, being discussed today.
And there's no height variance, there's no setback variance, there's only a parking variance.
I understand. What we're just trying to convey is the sight lines.
I'm sure you'll be able to see the building. I have no doubt about that.
Yep.
I have absolutely no doubt you'll be able to see it.
Yeah, so future conversations about landscaping potentially that we could have with either the city or the owners would probably be the best solution in terms of what we actually see.
Well, why don't you put on a record, what do you want to see, mature landscaping?
Well,
Like, I don't know how high of a tree you're going to put to screen as of right height.
this is just a quick study I did. I work in architecture and engineering as well. This is a view from the address 1486 Prince John Circle of the revised elevations that were submitted to the committee today.
Right.
And just wanted to show that, you know, in terms of mature trees, it's still, you know, it's going to take a long time.
How would you be able to screen that height from that view?
From this view, more trees.
Well, how big?
Well, it's going to take time, but time is now.
Well, right. So eventually you plant a seedling and you water it and it should grow.
All right. Who's
In
going to
theory.
plant those trees?
But the point I'm trying to make, and I'm not trying to be, we know that anything above a 2-story, maybe 3-story, you'll see. And whatever mature landscape you put there today, it's not going to be sufficient to mask that permitted height.
Okay.
I mean, I think
No,
you demonstrate that quite well with your sketch. And I don't think you want to see a wall there.
Tree walls would be great.
Trees, but where are you going to put trees? On whose side?
On the city side, on the owner's side?
Well, that's the point. The city
Yeah.
may not want a row of trees there. You know, so this is something that you need to discuss through the site plan committee.
Exactly.
What
Yes.
kind of screening, the
So-
extent of screening,
Yep.
where it goes.
Yep.
The city might not want to inherit 100 trees to screen a view for 2 neighbors. I don't know.
So as residents, we'd like to be part of the site plan review.
You should get a hold of your
Yes.
counselor.
Yep.
You know, we don't have any role in
Right.
site plan.
Sounds good.
But, I mean, I think you're in an area where this height's permitted. Anything over 2 stories, you're an architectural engineering student, I think you understand that you'll be able to see it. Second floor, you'll be able to see everything that you show there. And unless you put curtains on your window or block out that view, you'll see it. And it might be 20 years before landscaping is sufficient enough to provide the screen. Do you disagree with that?
I don't disagree. There's an adjacent property, you know, right beside it that's at the moment, you know, without a building on it. We'd like to see perhaps in the future, because my family, this is not their view. You should see their views between the 2 sites, between 2 hotels. If there could be a possibility in the future to address the concerns of the height restriction in this area.
Not through us. You have to talk to your counselor.
All right. Okay.
We only deal with variances. We have no
All right.
authority to,
Just thought I'd share this.
yeah.
Okay.
We have no authority to amend bylaws, other than through a variance process. Anyways,
Thank you.
thank you, Mr. Challen.
Good job.
You'll have to leave those with us. They're
Yep.
now our property. Any questions? Anyone else wishing to speak to the committee on application CAV 205-2016 at 2913 Sherwood Heights Drive? Okay, sir. Mr. Wright? Anything you wish to add?
Well, only that the height has been withdrawn, and when we did our modeling of the site, the tree lines that we did in our submission before was as scaled.
I remember that.
So anyway, basically, I hope that you've had a chance to review the justification study, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those. But Transportation and Planning did address those and support it. And I hope that we have reduced it enough that we are now greater than 1 per lodging unit at the end of the day.
Okay. I remember your submissions from not too long ago. Any questions? Okay, thank you. We'll take this matter to committee now. Thank you. Okay, who would like to move a recommendation on this? Mr. Talowski?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It was my motion to defer this application previously, not because of the height, but because there was no justification provided for the parking variance. That has since been provided. There is no longer any additional variances. While I'll note for the record the objection from the resident, I believe that the town has already accounted for the difference in use between the residential side of Sherwood Heights and the more industrial commercial side by the uncharacteristically deep lots that exist on Prince John Circle. And so, Mr. Chair, on the basis of the application before us and the strength of the parking justification report that was provided, I would move the application be approved as applied for, finding that it meets the test of the Planning Act, would make it subject to development proceeding in general accordance with the drawings permitted, and that a permit issue within 2 years.
In a slightly altered condition that the development be constructed in general accordance with the plan submitted, which is March 15, 2017, and subject to final site plan approval.
That's acceptable.
Okay, thank you. So the recommendation is to approve, subject to what we just discussed. Any discussion recommendation? Seeing none, all those in support? No one opposed, your application has been approved, sir. All right, we'll deal with our last application for this evening, CAVA 18-2017. This is a matter that was deferred from our January 31st, 2017 agenda, located at 574 Stevens Crescent. With the agent owner come forward, please?
Good evening. Good evening, Mr. Chair, committee members. My name is Milo Olear, and I'm representing owner.
Okay, thank you, sir. Just let's see if there's anyone here this evening that has an interest in application CAVA 18-2017, a revised application that was deferred from our January 31st, 2017 meeting located at 574 Stevens Crescent. No one here? Okay. Just hang on a second. Did we miss an application, or are you just here for everyone back there? Because this is our last one, and I haven't seen the show of hands. You're here just for general? Okay. All right, I'm just worried that we may have missed something. Oh, okay, well, good. We're glad to be part of your professional learning experience.
You could have watched us on YouTube, though.
No, it's nothing like being live. Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. Okay. Seeing that there's no one here in this application, members, I'm in your hands. You've done your site visit. You studied the application. This is a matter that was deferred. We're very familiar with the, is there any questions, any items of clarification? Anything you wish to add, sir? Can you briefly explain to us what the revision is, so we at least have
Sure,
that
yeah,
on
I'll do it
record?
very briefly because
Briefly,
it's
yes.
already late. The last meeting, the application was deferred since not all committee members found it desirable, and it was recommended to us that we talk to planning staff and find
Yes.
the ways. And that's what exactly happened.
Good.
We've done two major adjustments to the design. The one was the roof line, which we adjusted so the massing of the house is more sympathetic or compatible with the neighborhood. There was one major change we've done. And the second one was basically reducing the area that we requested to less than 2% of over the permitted floor area.
Perfect.
And just last thing, I want to thank you, planning staff, for recognizing our effort of making this building more compatible with the neighborhood and granting us support.
Okay. Seems to have worked out for you, at least so far.
Hopefully, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? See none? All right, who would like to move a recommendation? Mr. Hardcastle?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will put forward a motion. Having reviewed the materials and including these new revised drawings, which I will say have gone a long way towards addressing some of the concerns that I'd had. I think the alterations to the roof form really assist me. I'll put forward a motion of approval, subject to. Sorry, I should note that I feel that the application conforms to the 4 tests of the Act, and I will put forward a motion of approval, subject to 2 conditions. The first being that the proposed dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the plans dated March 1st, 2017, revision 4, as submitted, and the second being that the approval will expire within 2 years if a building permit has not been issued.
Thank you.
And thank you for that, and we'll reflect that there was no one here in attendance this evening and no written oral submissions. Okay, a discussion recommendation, or those 2 conditions? See none. All those in support? No one's opposed. Your application has been approved, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Other than Mr. Marc Charlebois, who would like to move the minutes of March 28, 2017? Mr. Hardcastle, you're on a roll.
Mr. Chairman?
All right, you move the minutes as they are presented?
Yes.
No discussion? Okay, all those in support? Minutes are approved, and just continue with an adjournment.
Adjournment, Mr. Chairman?
All right, all those in support? Good, we're adjourned at 8:41.